Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 120 of Sports Speak, the final edition of the show for 2022. I'm Eddie Kalegi, riding solo today. Tim Moore is under the weather. We'll get him back next week, but wanted to touch on some things as we close out the calendar year. Baseball, a little bit of a holdup with Carlos Correa and the Mets. What's going on there? And why Mets fans shouldn't worry. We'll take a look back at the NBA Christmas games. Now, a little more than 2 months through the season, what are some conclusions that we can make? And then on the other hand, we're going to go to the NFL, and that's actually where we're going to start. Week 17 is coming up. Sports Speak Fantasy Football Championship is coming up. But the story we have to talk about is the head coach firing of Nathaniel Hackett, and that's where we'll begin episode 120. So after just 15 games, Nathaniel Hackett is gone as head coach of the Denver Broncos. Kind of got bullied out of there by Patrick Starr. Humiliating 51-14 loss. Russ couldn't cook on Christmas Day against Baker Mayfield and the Rams, a Rams team that is a complete mess right now. Baker is their quarterback, no Cooper Kupp, no Aaron Donald, and completely at a loss and not in a good position because they don't have any draft picks going forwards because they traded all of them to win the Super Bowl last year. Yet Denver still looked so much markedly worse. And Russell Wilson, 2 huge interceptions in the first quarter. Brett Rippon ended up throwing a pick 6 later in the game. Brett Rippon got into a fight with one of his own offensive linemen on the sidelines. So this has been nothing short of a disaster for the Denver Broncos. And as many had thought, everyone knew he was going to be gone at the end of the year, but the Broncos decided to cut him 2 weeks early. And day after Christmas, it's announced that Nathaniel Hackett is out as head coach of the Denver Broncos after just 15 games, becoming just the 4th coach to get fired before the end of his first season. But I'll be honest, I think this is the worst one because he's just the 2nd who was not coming directly from college. And as we've seen throughout the years, college football coaching and National Football League coaching are 2 completely different animals, and some of the best in college football haven't been able to hang in the NFL. Nick Saban couldn't cut it in the NFL. Steve Spurrier couldn't cut it in the NFL. Really, the only one that we've seen that has had major success coming from college to the National Football League is Pete Carroll in Seattle coming from USC. In most cases, it hasn't worked. Bill O'Brien is another one. The other ones that got fired in the middle of their first season, Urban Meyer and Lou Holtz way back when with the Jets. And just let's think about the most recent case last year with Urban Meyer. I don't think that many people had very high expectations for them at all. Jaguars had been awful for the past 3 years. Trevor Lawrence was going to be probably a good quarterback, and he's definitely gotten better this year, but there was going to be a work in progress, and he had nothing else around him. And Urban Meyer, his last coaching job, he'd gotten dismissed from in college with Ohio State. So everybody knew that wasn't going to be easy. Nathaniel Hackett was coming into a situation where he was expected to perform well. And it's not all his fault, but let's be honest. It was telling from that first game against Seattle when he didn't know how to handle the timeouts at the end of the game, let 40 seconds just run off the clock, forced Brandon McManus to take a 64-yard field goal that he missed, left himself no time. And we dove into that on an episode a few months ago about how just absolutely insane that clock management was. So from that point on, the Broncos, the season just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And every time you thought this team could hit rock bottom, they went to another level of bottomness. And that's what the worst moment was, that whole Christmas game. I mean, you're getting flamed on Nickelodeon and you lose by 37 to a Rams team that essentially is playing a 3rd-string quarterback who couldn't work with the Carolina Panthers, and they're missing their best defensive player and their best wide receiver. I mean, it was straight disaster. You give up 51 points to Baker Mayfield. And as much as Russell Wilson has regressed, and it's been one of the craziest year-to-year drop-offs for a player of his caliber ever in any professional sport. I mean, 9 Pro Bowls in 10 years to this. It's not all on Russell Wilson because he can't play defense. He can't manage the clock. Nathaniel Hackett has to do that. Nathaniel Hackett had to bring in a clock manager to help him out during the season. That's how horrible this got for Denver. And it's just insane to see how this has all worked out. And Hackett, I mean, he was expected to do well. A lot of people thought Denver, with the pieces already in place over the last couple of years, everybody said they were a quarterback and a coach away. Everything else was there. And they got their quarterback in Russell Wilson. And yeah, Russ has struggled this season. But there are teams with bad quarterbacks that are going to probably find their way into the playoffs. Look at the NFC playoff picture right now and what quarterbacks could very likely make the postseason. Brock Purdy, a third stringer. Kirk Cousins. Tom Brady, who's having a bad year. Daniel Jones, the 7 seed. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't get it, it's either Carson Wentz / Taylor Heineke, Jared Goff, or Geno Smith. You don't need incredible quarterback play this year because right now we're in a period where there's not that many elite quarterbacks and there is a big gap between the best of the best, the Mahomes and the Allens and the Burrows, to everybody else. So a lot of this, you got to look at Nathaniel Hackett here and be like, I know the AFC is pretty stacked, but how are you performing this badly? I mean, how do you get swept by the Raiders? You got to do better than this. And because of the expectations and the fact that in very recent years, these offensive and defensive coordinators from good teams have gone on to become great coaches elsewhere. Just think about the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree and everybody who came over from that Washington staff 8 to 10 years ago and how they're doing the NFL. I mean, Dan Quinn even made it to a Super Bowl. I know that didn't work out, but he was a coordinator before that. Like, usually these guys at least find some success, especially if they were great offensive coordinators. The Packers, despite having, I'd say, limits at times with how many pieces they had around Aaron Rodgers, he found a way to make that offense dynamic the last couple of years. Aaron Rodgers winning back-to-back MVPs. So, to me, this is the worst coaching performance in NFL history because it's NFL to NFL. It's not college to NFL where we know there are struggles at times. Nathaniel Hackett, high expectations. A lot of people picked the Broncos to win the West or be right up there with Kansas City, and they have been one of the 3 worst teams in the NFL this entire season. So that's item number 1 I had to start with. In terms of the actual games coming up this weekend, week 17, 2 weeks left in the year, still a lot of questions about what's going to happen with the playoff picture. A lot of interesting games to look at this week. Patriots-Dolphins is the first one. Of course, Tua Tagovailoa in concussion protocol again for his own health. I think it would make sense to shut him down for the rest of the season. This is the 3rd concussion in 3 months, and we all remember what happened in the second one against Cincinnati on Thursday Night Football back in September. And a lot of questions about how the NFL carried out the situation and if a spotter was necessary to spot it after he had banged his head on the turf in the second quarter against Green Bay. And a lot of people are drawing comparisons as to this being the reason why he threw the 3 picks in the second half and why he looked absolutely awful against that Packers defense on Christmas. So that's not good for them. New England somehow, because everybody's been losing in the AFC playoff picture, they're still hanging in there despite 2 awful losses in a row. Of course, the horrible, horrible play at the end of the Raiders game, where I don't know what Jacoby Myers was doing and why they were trying to lateral the ball when it was a tie game, when they could have just gone to overtime, and why Ramondre Stevenson didn't just keep running forwards or just step out of bounds and send it to OT. And then even if he's going to lateral once, why Jacoby Myers decided to throw a bomb pass back to Mac Jones, who wasn't going to be able to do that much with it, ends up throwing it right to Chandler Jones, and then Mac couldn't make the tackle, and then the Raiders win it. So that was embarrassing. And then they nearly came back against the Bengals and made some poor mistakes at the end of that game, even though they got set up perfectly. And once again, Ramondre Stevenson was the problem as he fumbled the ball on a drive that could have given New England a 3-point lead with less than 2 minutes to go. They play against the Dolphins, so neither of these teams are set into the playoffs yet like 100%. But the Dolphins right now hold the 7 seed, and if they win this game, I think the AFC wildcard picture is going to be set pretty much heading into week 18. regardless of what happens around the rest of the AFC. So if the Dolphins can take care of business in this game, I think they should be feeling pretty confident. I know they play the Jets in week 18, but this is a prime opportunity for Teddy Bridgewater, get the Dolphins to the playoffs. But if they lose this one, the AFC playoff picture is suddenly wide open because the Patriots are still in it, the Jets are still in it, the Steelers are still in it. There's still many teams who could sneak in. Of course, 2 wild card spots are set. Chargers have one. Bengals or Ravens will get the other, whoever does not win the AFC North. Eagles and Giants both playing essentially must-win games. Philly, New York, and Dallas all got cakewalk opponents this week. Cowboys, they took care of business already on Thursday night, beat Josh Dobbs despite a couple of early turnovers by Dak. The Giants are playing Jeff Saturday's Colts, who will be starting Nick Foles again. Of course, they had the horrendous loss where they blew a 33-point lead in the third quarter against Minnesota about 2 weeks ago. And I mean, that's one of the worst losses we've ever seen. Of course, Matt Ryan now has to say that he experienced the biggest Super Bowl comeback. He was on the losing end of that, and the biggest regular season comebacks in NFL history, and was the quarterback that absorbed both of those comebacks against him. So that's really bad. And, you know, I'm really curious to see how Jeff Saturday finishes off this tenure, but that game made it obvious that there is no way that Jim Irsay can give him the full-time job next year, because as much as people want to pin it on Matt Ryan, and I know he kind of gets, you know, thrown into it a bit because of the trend of him being the quarterback in these types of situations. Again, like I said with Russell Wilson, the quarterback does not play defense. The quarterback does not manage the clock and the 3 timeouts. That's up to the coach. That's up to the defensive players. And I mean, that screen pass to Dalvin Cook, he should have been down at like the 25. They let him score a 75-yard touchdown. Like that just can't happen. And then they play on Monday Night Football against the Chargers, who looked bad, but the Colts were just pathetic. And once again, as an Eagle fan, it fuels the narrative that Nick Foles is an elite quarterback when he's with Philadelphia, and he's horrible anywhere else. But he's going to be starting against the Giants, and then the Eagles trying to bounce back from this loss to Dallas. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I'll talk about that game in a second. Eagles against New Orleans. Saints, very slim chance at this point to even make it into the postseason. They need a lot of help at this point. They need to win both of their games. Eagles probably starting Gardner Minshew. I think Philly's going to be fine in this game. I think they'll be able to lock up the 1 seed. They can do that with a win. They'll clinch the division and the 1 seed, so they'll get the bye. Giants, I think, will win it too. I know the Giants have played down to a couple opponents this season, but they've looked great, and I think they're going to be able to get into the postseason. But I am happy to say that the Giants are not going to be getting to 11 wins this year. So next time Tim is on, I can remind him of that. His 11-6 prediction will come up short. I will say, though, a valiant effort with him predicting them going as far as they have and getting probably an above 500 record and maybe making the postseason. He did attribute a lot of that to their schedule. But in any event, talking about the Eagles, if Jalen Hurts was the quarterback of that game in Dallas, I'm pretty much 100% sure the Eagles would have won that game. I cannot say the same that if Dak started in week 6 against Philadelphia at the Link, that Dallas would have won that game. That's the deciding factor. I don't agree with the people who are drawing comparisons to the 2 games and saying, well, they're even because they won at home against the opposing team's backup quarterback. If you watch that last play of the game with Gardner Minshew on the 4th down, that falling away play, forcing the throw to the back of the end zone, that wouldn't have gone that way if Jalen Hurts was the quarterback, because with his elusiveness and his speed, he would have been able to scramble away, get some space, and throw, or draw the defense out and then cut in and be able to get in for a touchdown like he did when he had the game winner against the Colts a few weeks ago. So that's what my thoughts are there. Eagles and Cowboys, good chance they're going to get a round 3 because Dallas is probably going to end up with a 5 seed and be playing the NFC South champion, who will be below 500. Then the winner of that game more than likely would end up playing Philadelphia. So I think the score will be settled officially in their 3rd matchup, but I'm sticking with the narrative that the Eagles are a much better team than the Dallas Cowboys. Not saying, though, the Eagles don't have problems because injuries, Jalen Hurts, now Lane Johnson, Avonte Maddox, those are three huge pieces they're going to be without. Eagles are probably going to beat New Orleans. Giants, I think, will be safe against the Colts. NFC South is a big game. The Bucks against the Panthers. The Panthers, if they win, I mean, I can't believe this, but if they win their next two games, they can be the NFC South champs. They control their own destiny at this point. And they shellacked Detroit, who came in winning 6 of 7 and destroyed them in Carolina on Christmas Eve, running the ball, 260 rush yards in the first half between Hubbard and Blackshear and Foreman. They have 3 good backs right now. Sam Darnold is doing enough at QB. And at this point, the way the playoff system works in the NFL, that's all you need. And the Panthers, if they can beat the Bucks, the problem is Tampa has been playing so well in the fourth quarter and overtime lately. They had that big comeback against Arizona, a couple of weeks before that against New Orleans. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to beat Tom Brady in a game like this. But they have beaten them already this season. I'll be curious to see what happens. What I'd like to see, the Bucks play so well when they go up tempo, when they go no huddle, quickly to the line, and let Tom Brady fire away. That's the kind of drive he's thrived on throughout his career. And I know you can't do that every drive. But instead of putting yourself in a desperate situation where you need to do that to get back into a game to tie it or win it in the fourth quarter, why not sprinkle in some up-tempo and some no-huddle in the first half? Because that's where defenses get caught off guard, because often they're playing prevent because Tom Brady still has a cannon of an arm for 45 years old and likes to throw it deep. And then he's able to dink and dunk his way down the field. And when you're at speed and at pace, you can take full advantage while the defense is trying to adjust. So I'd try to do that more in the first half rather than just in the fourth quarter when you're bogged down by 7, down by 13, needing Brady magic to get back in the game. Do it in the first half, and then you won't have to do it in the fourth quarter. So I'll be curious to see. I've got the Bucks in that game. Looking at the rest of the schedule, Lions must win against Chicago. That was a bad loss to Carolina. Sucked all the momentum out of that team. The defense got completely exposed. They need to beat Chicago in that game badly. Kansas City plays Denver. That should probably be a blowout. Jacksonville against Houston doesn't matter. Texans did beat them the first time around. But regardless of what happens in this Jags game, the AFC South will come down to the Week 18 matchup between the Titans and the Jags. Josh Dobbs, I think, is going to end up being the quarterback for Tennessee. Looked much more composed than Malik Willis on Thursday, even though he took the loss at home against the Cowboys. The Niners facing off with the Raiders. Niners trying to see if maybe they can sneak into the 2 seed. They got to keep winning. Brock Purdy has looked electric so far. Once again, proving the point that in the NFL, maybe it's more beneficial for a quarterback to sit there and learn for a bit before he steps onto the field. Brock Purdy, a 7th-round pick, 3rd in the depth chart to start the year, but with the 2 injuries to Garoppolo and Lance inserted into the main role, and he has thrived now. And also the Niners just have such a good support system around him. The addition of Christian McCaffrey, even without Debo, Jennings, Ayuk, Kittle, everybody is stepping up on that offense. So I think the Niners, and defensively, they've been great too. And the Raiders just benched Derek Carr. At this point, I think Carr is gone from Vegas. I was talking about this on my show at Rutgers. I could see Carr getting traded to Seattle, and then the Raiders using that to trade up for Seattle's pick from Denver, which could be top 5, and then drafting like a CJ Stroud. I think Pete Carroll would prefer at his older age to get an established quarterback versus someone young that he has to mentor at this point, because Seattle has a lot of other pieces in place. They have to improve their defense. They can do that in the draft and then get an established quarterback in Derek Carr, who I don't think is done. I do not think he's cooked. I think he's still got a lot in the tank, and the reason he struggled so much this year is because of a Raiders situation under Josh McDaniels that hasn't allowed him to thrive. Huge game between the Vikings and the Packers. Green Bay has won 4 straight. If they win their next 2, chances are they're making the playoffs. They have rallied. Aaron Rodgers is finally finding reliable receivers in that young, inexperienced wide receiver room between Allen Lazard, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. he's finding his way down the field. The two backs, Jones and Dillon, have looked good too. And Rodgers has looked much more composed the last 4 weeks. So I think Green Bay could be in a prime position here, try to get revenge against Minnesota, who has looked very vulnerable and have escaped by the skin of their teeth the last 2 weeks. And the week before that, lost by double figures to Detroit. So I think at Lambeau, with the crowd on their side, I got the Packers in that game. And as you'll see, Sports Speak Live, by the way, you can follow us on Twitter there. That's where we do our weekly pick'em. Unless Tim takes that one, he picks first this week. That's going to be one of my games. I have a lot of confidence in Green Bay heading into this week, especially since Minnesota already locked up the division. And by then, I think the Eagles are going to have one at 1 o'clock, and Minnesota's going to have no chance at the 1 seed. So there's not going to be as much motivation for them. The main motivation will be keep your rivals out of the playoffs. And I don't think they're going to be able to do that with that Lambeau crowd and with Aaron Rodgers playing great over the last month. So that's going to be a big game to watch. Another one is Jets-Seahawks, two teams that have been scuffling over the past month that still have a chance at the playoffs. Both of these teams are in that situation where they're 7-8 right now, and there's a final wild card spot up for grabs for a team about that caliber. The problem is, I think there are better teams around them. Geno Smith has finally started to look like Geno Smith over the last couple of games, and Seattle's defense has been bad. The Legion of Boom is not there. They also have not been able to protect home field. I mean, they lose to Carolina and Atlanta at home. What happened to the 12th man? And Lockett's been hurt. He's supposed to be back. I don't really have much faith in the Seahawks, but I don't in the Jets either. Mike White has looked good, and he's going to be back as the QB1 for this game. Jets need to win the next 2 weeks against Seattle and Miami. Both are winnable games, but I don't see the Jets winning both of them. It's going to be hard. Right now, I'd give the Seahawks the edge, but I think that game's really a pick'em. And then the Sunday night game is Pittsburgh and Baltimore. That's an interesting one, too. The Bengals and the Ravens both still playing for first place in the AFC North. Cincinnati against Buffalo. Burrow's played well against elite quarterbacks lately. He beat Tom Brady this year. He beat Patrick Mahomes this year. Can he beat Josh Allen? The game's at home. Bill's trying to lock up that 1 seed. Bengals trying to lock up the North potentially. That could be interesting. And Pittsburgh, there is still a chance somehow that Mike Tomlin can avoid a losing season for the first time in his career, despite them really struggling out of the gates. I believe they were 1-4, then they were 3-8, and just like Green Bay, they keep winning. Now they're 7-8. They won on Franco Harris night against the Raiders. A little bit of immaculate air there in Pittsburgh on the 50th anniversary of that legendary play. And now they play against Baltimore, a team that they almost beat at M&T Bank Stadium a few weeks ago, a 16-14 win for the Ravens, a game where Pickett got hurt and they had Trubisky out there. Now that Pickett's back, I'd look out for that game. That could be sneaky. Baltimore could be in trouble with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. But one more football thing quickly to touch on, Sports Speak Fantasy. Now, I have had some craziness happen, of course, with my team with the collapse and me missing the playoffs after nearly getting the 2 seed, but I barely snuck through the consolation round against T-Glass by just 3 points. So I'll be playing Pochia for the 5th place game, the consolation championship. I'm currently up 38-21 after Thursday night's action. T-Glass is playing Miniker for 7th place. And then the last place game now is between Drew and Franks. But the games that matter in the semifinals, a huge upset. Down goes number 1, Raheel, who was 13-1, 3 more wins than any other team this season, found his kryptonite in Andrew Bellows and got smacked. He lost by 109, and it was a disastrous week. He had stuck with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, hoping he was going to play. He did not. And then he had a big enough lead where he could absorb that. But then Bellows' team just went absolutely crazy. Burrow, Barkley, Eckler, Devontae Smith all completely went off. Jalen Waddle as well. The Patriots defense. Brett Maher had 18 points as the kicker. Nick Folk had 0 for Raheel this week. Bellows outscored Raheel by 97 points this week. So kudos to Andrew. Got into the playoffs by the skin of his teeth and now blows out Raheel to get to the championship. The other matchup was a little closer. Zoe against Tim, two very evenly matched teams who were in that Eastern division with me, who both made it to the playoffs because I collapsed. And Zoe, one of the big differences, Jared Goff, you're welcome. I gave him to you, and he got 26 points this past week. Zoe outscored Tim this week 159-91. Remember, the way we're doing this is that it's 2-week rounds. So the championship round's actually going to go 2 weeks and involve week 18, where there could be players resting. So that's one of our little quirks of this fun little fantasy league with a lot of gimmicks that we did from draft day all the way to the end. But Zoe's team played great. TJ Hawkinson, her Lions faithful, now with the Vikings, 36 points against the Giants. And Tim, his team played well, 224, but came up short by 36 points against Zoe. So it's going to be Zoe against Bellows over these next 2 weeks for the championship. Bellows right now up 10-0. This week, of course, it's 2 weeks, as I said. He's projected to outscore Zoe's team by 8. Zoe has Jared Goff starting at QB over Aaron Rodgers. So I'll be curious to see if any changes are made in the next 16 hours or so before game time to begin week 17. But that's it with football. Couple more things to touch on. Let's go to baseball quickly. Now, the Mets have not signed Carlos Correa. There's not going to be any news until probably we're through New Year's tomorrow and then the observed holiday on the 2nd. Then they'll get back to work on the 3rd. People are saying 51%, 55%. I don't think any of that matters. If Carlos Correa signs with the Mets, that's great. I think this ankle is going to be a problem. I think Mets fans will regret that it's a 12-year deal in the future, but Steve Cohen clearly has the money to throw around. But if this does not work out, I don't think the Mets fans should panic. Because number one, the last time that Steve Cohen felt like he got screwed was when Jacob deGrom left for Texas. What does he do? He immediately signs Justin Verlander. He goes absolutely insane. He brings back Nimmo. He gets Kodai Senga and all that jazz. The previous time, when Steven Matz left, what does he do? He signs Marte. He signs Escobar. He signs Canna. He does all these other things. So if this does not work out with Correa, I think I could see him very easily going crazy. And while it might not happen now, I think he can save up and then make the big move, which is getting Shohei Ohtani next year, or maybe even at the trade deadline this year. So I would not be worried if I'm a Met fan from that standpoint. And also, people are forgetting they have 3 net positive options on the roster to play third base right now if Correa can't, and he's not there. Eduardo Escobar, outside of Jeff McNeil, might have been the second best offensive player from the Mets from about August 20th through the rest of the season last year. Brett Beatty, while he missed time with the hand injury, he did homer in his first major league at bat and is a high-level prospect. I think there is something there. And Luis Guillorme hit sub 300 last season and is one of the best defensive utility infielders in baseball right now. Those are 3 prime options you can slide in, or you could play Guillorme at second and move Jeff McNeil over to third. I know McNeil's had some defensive woes at times in the infield, but I think he's improved, especially from 2020 and 2021 over to last year. And you might be saying, well, if you play Escobar at third, who's going to be the DH when you don't want Vogelbach in there because you don't want Darren Ruff in the lineup? I think people are forgetting Mets have 3 major league catchers on their roster right now that can all contribute to this team. James McCann is gone, but you got Narvaez, who's probably going to be the main starter, Nito, who's going to stay in the backup role, and you got the number 1 prospect in baseball, Francisco Alvarez, and we saw how Alvarez limited playing time, but could handle major league pitching as soon as he came up. So how about using him as a DH? Save his legs. He's young. He's a big dude. How about saving his legs a bit, and instead of having him catch, use him as a DH? Let him get used and acclimated to major league pitching. And then if you can't sign Nito in the future, or if Narvaez is just a short-term option, rotate him to catcher Or if somebody gets hurt, rotate him to catcher. If Narvaez struggles and he turns into James McCann 2.0, move Alvarez to catcher, Escobar to DH, Guillorme to third, and then you don't have to play Narvaez. This team has so many different directions they can go that if they have Correa, it's great. But if they don't, no need to panic. Carlos Correa is like an extra Christmas gift at this point. Steve Cohen's given the Mets fans a lot of presents this year. He's replaced the pieces that needed to be replaced. He's brought back Nimmo and Diaz, which he had said were his two main intentions. He's bolstered the rotation from where it was last year. He has certainly bolstered the bullpen from last season. And the offense last year, yes, it had its quirks, but when push came to shove, most of the year it was good. It came up short at times late in the season, but so did the starting pitching. They did score some runs in those Braves games. They did score some runs against San Diego. What didn't happen was Max Scherzer didn't pitch well and Chris Bassett didn't pitch well. So you got to remember that. So if Carlos Correa comes, I'd be excited as a Met fan. 12 years of him. He's a great hitter. He's one of the best clutch players in baseball right now and still probably a top 10 defender in the league. But if things don't work out and this ankle problem is more than people are letting on, you don't need to panic. There are a lot of ways the Mets can go. This team is deep. Let's finish quickly with the NBA. Christmas games are past. I watched some of them, not all of them. First of all, I wish the Nets were on Christmas, but I do understand in some ways the reasoning. I know they were concerned the Nets were going to blow it up in the offseason, didn't want to give them a national game, but I would have rather seen them than the Knicks. The Knicks played 3 good quarters against the Sixers and got absolutely clapped in the fourth quarter by Georges Niang, of all people. So I'd like to see that. And the Knicks are in complete free fall right now. 3 awful losses in a row. I mean, you miss 4 free throws late in that game against Chicago. Then you lose to the Sixers, a game you fought hard for 3 quarters. It didn't show up for the 4th. And then that game against Dallas where you lead by 9 with 33 seconds left and you lose. And Luka Doncic puts up one of the best offensive games in NBA history. 60 points, 21 boards, 10 assists. That's unheard of. Wilt Chamberlain had never done that. So the Knicks, I think, are a bit fraudulent. And the fact that they were up to 5th in the standings, they're playing a little above their heads. They'll be in the play-in tournament. But I'd be shocked if they make it top 6 this year. But other conclusions from these games. Number one, I don't know why James Harden wants to go back to Houston. That's insane. He took a pay cut for the Sixers team that's playing well. I think his best spot right now is in Philly. Tyrese Maxey has a good future. So does Joel Embiid. Sixers are in a prime position to contend for multiple years. They are built well to contend in the future and in the present. And I think they're in a good spot right now. And I don't know why he'd want to leave that situation. Lakers, they are just puzzling at this point. I mean, there's LeBron James is doing crazy things on his 38th birthday, an assist shy of a 40-point triple-double, and he's got nothing else there. And Anthony Davis is hurt again. Davis is becoming Greg Oden at this point of his career, just cannot stay on the court. Somehow suffers like a stress fracture in his knee on a collision. I mean, it's just endless for Anthony Davis at this point. And the Lakers just don't have any wing players that can really play well. And I know Dallas has its flaws. And Luka's been sensational, and he doesn't have that much around him. And people say he's getting wasted there, and they need to get other pieces around him. But at least he has shooters. The Lakers need to recognize that in the world of basketball we play today, I know things have changed a little bit over the last couple of years with Jokic and Embiid, and teams are playing more inside. But the story of the NBA in 2022-23 is being able to shoot the ball from the perimeter, and the Lakers do not have people who can do that. Russell Westbrook and Patrick Beverley on the same team playing significant minutes just isn't going to work because you can't have these ball-dominant point guards that don't shoot the basketball. And LeBron James is not a great shooter. He's a great scorer. And then you have older wing pieces and kind of random guys worked in. The reason the Lakers won the championship in the bubble year was 3 things. 1, you had LeBron. 2, you had 3-point shooters. And 3, you had key defenders that could play big minutes and brought a lot of athleticism. They do not have the second or the third right now. They don't have people who can shoot the three like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and they don't have those explosive, quick hit guys like Alex Caruso, who can make a big splash for you offensively, get a steal, get a block on the defensive end, and transition it to a three or a slam. Kyle Kuzma, I think, worked a similar route, though he did struggle the year after that. And I think it's funny when we have the GOAT debate in the NBA between LeBron and Michael Jordan, that there is still clear room for someone to easily surpass them in the GOAT debate in the future, because there is something that neither of them can do. Neither one of them is good at recognizing what talent is needed around them to be great, and what talent is needed in different NBA eras to compete and contend. Right now, LeBron's Lakers and Michael Jordan's Charlotte Hornets, of course, he's the primary owner of that team and orchestrator of that roster, those might be the two most poorly constructed rosters in the NBA. And neither LeBron nor Michael Jordan seem to realize what it takes on a roster to be a contender in the NBA right now. You can't just throw names out there that are superstars. That worked for the Heat 10 years ago. That's not going to work now. Just look at the Phoenix Suns, the Memphis Grizzlies, teams like that have gone on deep runs. It's not like they've just paired together a bunch of superstars. There is homegrown talent there that goes along with some all-star caliber players. And you need three-point shooting in this era, and you can't just throw together some random guys you find and hope it sticks. Like that, it's amazing. As great of players that LeBron and Michael Jordan are, I still think there's a shortcoming with both of them in recognizing, relatable supplementary talent. So that's another conclusion I can make. And last thing I want to say is that the Warriors, if Steph Curry is healthy, I think are still the favorites in the West. You look at that game against Memphis, the Grizzlies looked overmatched. Draymond Green was getting in their faces. Jordan Poole shot the ball well. So did Klay Thompson. Golden State has a deep team. I think this iteration of the Warriors last year and this year is much deeper than it was 5-6 years ago. Of course, they didn't need that 5-6 years ago because Steph, Klay, Draymond, they were young in their prime. They could play 40 minutes. But they're all getting an advanced age at this point in the second half of their careers. You need guys who can spell them some minutes. And now you have that with the Warriors. So this team is in perfect position. When Steph comes back, they're going to get a top 6 seed in the West, I think, when it all boils down. And as long as they have that, Phoenix is not reliable in the playoffs. Dallas doesn't have anybody but Luka. Memphis is still relatively young and inexperienced. New Orleans is inexperienced. They're still the favorites in the West. So that's what I saw. Celtics are great. Nets are playing great. I hope the Nets can keep it going. Milwaukee's looked good. They'll be fine when Middleton comes back. West is stacked. Also, shout out Sacramento. The Kings have been playing sensational. That building has been loud with lighting the beam and all that. They have one of the most passionate fan bases in the NBA right now. And I really hope they can make the playoffs because those fans deserve it for sticking with them year in and year out. And it finally feels like the team has some direction. I didn't really understand the Halliburton trade last year, but it's worked out because Domantas Sabonis has played great, and they replaced Halliburton with Kevin Huerter, who had that huge clutch game-winning shot the other night. So they're fine. And De'Aaron Fox is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. So I think Sacramento can get into the play-in tournament, and I hope they get to host and play some NBA postseason games this year because Sacramento deserves playoff basketball. That will wrap up 2022 here on SportsSpeak. It was a fun year. We had our first 2 in-person episodes. So I want to take some time now, take a look back at some of our fondest moments from 2022. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I am Tim Moore.
This is actually Tim Moore. We are not on a Zoom screen. We're recording this on Zoom. We don't have any guests today, but that's okay because we are live in person, a live remote from the Hampton Inn in Yonkers, New York.
Why are we talking about the Lakers?
I don't know. It's fun.
No. Sean Marks has done a great job with this team. You can say what you want. All right. Is it his fault that we don't know where the hell Ben Simmons is? Is it his fault that Kyrie Irving didn't get vaccinated? Is it his fault that James Harden started tanking?
Welcome to episode 114 of Sports Speak. We are here live at WRSU Studios in New Brunswick, New Jersey. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Aaron Rodgers has nothing there. Now, I want to look for
is not that bad.
Randall
Cobb is the best receiver.
Randall Cobb is out.
Aaron Rodgers. You actually have someone to rely on this year. You have Max Scherzer, who rarely ever gets hurt.
7 minutes ago, Evan Roberts just tweeted, Andy Martino tweeted, Evan Roberts said, Max Scherzer is dealing with a hamstring injury. What I hear from Mets is they think he'll be okay for the opener. We'll pitch in a sim game tomorrow. Are you kidding me? They're not losing anything. They're gaining stuff. Now Bellows has the lead, and I'm hoping in the second half, maybe Colt McCoy can do something. He keeps turning over the ball. Then the Patriots get a defensive touchdown. They finish with 20 defensive points, and I lose. And I go from going into the night having essentially a 90% chance to win the division and finish second in the regular season to missing the playoffs entirely. And now I'm playing some meaningless game against T-Glass for 5th place that I don't even care about. So I got absolutely hosed.
Okay.
Juju Smith-Schuster has signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. So another player is going to the AFC West. He just announced it. Adam Schefter just tweeted it 1 minute ago.
He's going to get the Sammy Watkins treatment.
Thanksgiving is so horrible. And honestly, Thanksgiving has become one of my least favorite holidays. And it's not just because I don't like turkey. It's literally because I can't sit there and have the world mock the Lions on national television year after year.
And let's be honest, again, if there's nobody to hit for average other than Aaron Judge and maybe a healthy DJ LeMahieu, you're not going to get consistent production, which is the frustrating part. We're not going and getting bats. We're sticking with Aaron freaking Hicks, who couldn't hit a freaking ball if it was put on a tee in front of him.
I'm not worried about that in this debate. My only
has a 50% completion percentage.
Okay, my only concern in this debate, Tim, is that the Eagles are going to finish ahead of the Giants. I don't care if that means they go 9-8 because that'll definitely get them ahead of the Giants.
But we're talking about too the Eagles going on a playoff run or a wild card run. This team's not good enough to go on a playoff run. I'm not saying the Giants are either, but the Giants at least play the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Houston Texans.
The Eagles play them too.
They play the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to have Drew Lock under center. The Eagles don't have to play the Seahawks.
I'm not going to be nice to Zoe. Miss Alter, I was looking at your roster, and I see you do not have a quarterback yet. Now, I also remember who your favorite team is, and you're hyping them up, and then they're not going to have a run game, so they're going to be throwing the ball all the time. So your quarterback for 2022 is Mr. Jared Goff. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Of course, the Sports Speak fantasy football draft, when I tried to give Zoe Jared Goff, which has paid off for her. I think that was pretty funny, and it was great having Tim in person a couple of times, and we can't wait for year 4 of Sports Speak. We'll be back at it in 2023. Next week, final week of the NFL season, playoff spots at stake. Baseball, probably some signings are going to kick up again. College football playoff going on as I speak, as I record this, and national championship after that, and Daytona 500, which is a little over a month away. So getting excited for all of that. Remember to follow us on Twitter at SportsSpeak Live. You can get show updates and follow along with our NFL Weekly Pick'em. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi signing off. Happy New Year. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you in 2023.